Okay, let's unpack a deeply challenging political question.
Hmm.
How do you take power, establish a sovereign state, and then restore a national identity?
Right.
A process that, it usually requires decades of bloody revolution.
Hmm.
How do you do all that without ever firing a single antagonistic shot against the reigning empire?
It sounds like a geopolitical fantasy, doesn't it? For centuries, the default path to independence was, well, it was open rebellion, a huge public break.
But the Tahirids did it.
Exactly. The
Yeah.
Tahirids, operating in the 9th century, they solved this paradox entirely through, of all things, strategic obedience.
So today we're diving deep into the Tahirid Dynasty, running from about 821 to 873. They essentially engineered the first successful semi-autonomous Muslim Persian state after the initial Arab conquests.
And they did it in such a clever way.
They didn't just govern, they demonstrated that extreme, almost verifiable loyalty could be the most effective, most sustainable path to complete local autonomy.
And what's so crucial to understand here is that the Tahirids, they created the foundational blueprint. I mean, the blueprint for nearly all subsequent Persian political movements.
The turning point.
The definitive turning point for Muslim Persia. They established this model of governance based on what our sources call calm authority. They restored what historians refer to as Persia's political mind.
So our mission today is to figure out exactly how they pulled this off, this slow motion, nonviolent takeover. We're going to trace the steps from a decisive battlefield victory to institutionalizing power in a new capital.
And using loyalty not as submission, but as a strategic tool to gain space and legitimacy.
And we begin not with a revolutionary.
No, not at all. We begin with a highly successful functionary of the Abbasid Caliphate.
Let's set the scene in Persia before the Tahirids. I mean, while local power structures always existed for about 2 centuries after the conquests, the real political authority.
The governors, the military, the money.
Exactly. It all rested with Arab governors sent directly from Baghdad or, earlier from Damascus. It was foreign administration, even if the locals were Muslim.
Absolutely. And Tahir ibn Hussein, the founder of this dynasty, he came from an old, established Persian noble family, but they had fully integrated into the Abbasid state machinery.
So he wasn't a radical.
Not in the least. Tahir wasn't radicalized. He was born to climb the ladder of Abbasid service.
And he didn't just climb it. He became the key player in what was, well, arguably the biggest internal political crisis the Abbasids ever faced. The destructive civil war between Caliph Harun al-Rashid's 2 sons, Al-Amin and Al-Mamun.
And this wasn't some minor succession squabble. This was a fight that threatened to dismantle the entire caliphate.
Right.
Al-Amin controlled the capital in Baghdad, relying on the established sort of Arab-centric forces.
Right.
Al-Mamun, though, his power base was in the eastern provinces, in Khorasan, and he desperately needed a brilliant general.
And that general was Tahir. The sources describe him as Du'ali Yaminen, or the ambidextrous one, a commander whose discipline and tactical brilliance were legendary.
And his troops, primarily drawn from the fierce Khorassani frontier peoples, they were the force multiplier Al-Mamun needed.
So Tahir's forces march west. They decisively defeat Al-Amin's troops and, most critically,
They lay siege to Baghdad.
and capture it. An unprecedented moment. The gates of the capital were opened by a Persian commander from the east, ending the war and putting Al-Mamun on the throne.
It just profoundly shifted the political center of gravity.
So winning the war is one thing, but how did he translate that immense military victory into institutional permanence? I mean, he just delivered the throne.
He could have asked for anything.
Right. The title of Emir al-Umara, commander of commanders, or taken vast wealth, maybe married into the royal family. Was there a real risk he would, miscalculate and just demand too much?
That is the pivotal question. If he had demanded permanent residence in Baghdad or, tried to micromanage the caliph, he would have been seen as a threat.
Too much of a threat.
For sure. The caliphate still commanded immense symbolic and religious authority. So instead of demanding a role at the heart of the empire, which was perpetually unstable and full of jealous rivals, Tahir asked for something that looked far less glamorous.
The governorship of Khorasan.
The governorship of Khorasan.
Khorasan. The caliph, Al-Mamun, he must have thought this was a brilliant deal. He gets rid of a potentially troublesome, immensely powerful general by sending him way out east, while benefiting from Tahir's proven loyalty and capacity for order.
Exactly. The caliph saw it as delegating a difficult frontier region to a trusted servant. But Tahir saw it as receiving the key to his own kingdom.
Ah.
The insight here is that by granting this appointment, The caliph unintentionally ceded the space Tahir needed to build a structure that was functionally independent, one that looked much more like a hereditary dynasty than a mere temporary appointment.
He gave his loyal general the freedom to be sovereign.
Pretty much.
So Tahir establishes the foundation. His successors and the dynasty itself, they immediately pivot the attention away from Baghdad, establishing a new political headquarters.
And the choice of the capital, Nishapur, is so critical. It wasn't random. It wasn't the traditional Abbasid administrative center of Merv.
So what was special about Nishapur?
It was a cultural, commercial, and geographical powerhouse. It was sitting right at the junction of major trade routes, including the Silk Road.
So they were building a commercial engine, not just a governmental office. When the Tahirids set up their court in Nishapur, they were signaling that this was the new epicenter of power for the East.
They weren't just administering a province, they were building a capital city designed to support local long-term rule.
Okay, so this brings us to the practical mechanisms of this quiet takeover, the pillars of the Tahirid state.
Right. And these are the specific, unromantic details that truly define their autonomy. It's really crucial for you, our listener, to grasp these. These are the mechanisms that stripped Baghdad of actual power while maintaining, symbolic deference.
Let's focus on the most important pillar first. Control over revenue. How exactly did they restructure tax administration to make sure the wealth flowed to Nishapur and not through Baghdad's channels?
Okay, so this was their most audacious move.
Yeah.
Historically, the caliphate would send these specific, often corrupt financial agents to collect taxes and send the bulk of it back to the capital.
Yeah.
The Tahirids insisted on collecting all taxes themselves. They would remit a fixed annual sum, a kind of tribute to Baghdad, but they kept control of the administration, the surplus, and the local coinage.
Which means they control the local economy and, crucially, the budget for their own projects. If you control the money, you control the ability to wage war, build infrastructure, and reward loyalty.
Precisely. And that leads directly to the second pillar, controlling the military.
Right.
Their troops were Khorassani, loyal to the Tahirid family line, not just the abstract authority of the Abbasid Caliph in Baghdad.
So by funding their own standing army from local revenue, they created this powerful security force that had no personal ties to the politics of the capital.
Exactly. They had the means and the muscle.
But a dynasty needs legitimacy. So what about the third pillar, controlling judges and administrative appointments?
That is how they shaped local society and culture. The Tahirids appointed their own local judges, or qadis, and administrative officers. And while these guys upheld the larger Islamic legal framework, their authority came from the Tahirid governorship.
So local law, local justice, land distribution, all implemented under Tahirid authority.
Which fostered deep support among the Persian landowning class, the Dikrans.
So they had effective control over the economy, the military, and the judiciary. This does raise a challenging point, though. Was this calm authority just a disguise for a fear of Abbasid retaliation? I mean, how fragile was this independence?
It was fragile at first, but it became institutionalized through mutual dependence. The Abbasids accepted it because the Tahirids were reliable in three critical ways.
Okay.
1, they paid the tribute. 2, they maintained order and security in Khorasan, which was a vital frontier for Baghdad's eastern defense. And 3, they upheld strict Sunni orthodoxy.
So they were predictable, they were useful, and they never pushed their luck by making loud, unnecessary declarations of independence.
That's the core of the paradox. They gained power through calculated constraint. And you have to remember, the caliphate was suffering from internal weakness, political infighting back in Baghdad. The cost of marching an army all the way east to remove the Tahirids would have been immense.
Destabilizing the economy, inviting rebellion elsewhere.
Absolutely. The relationship evolved. The caliphate didn't want to fight a powerful, well-managed, and consistently loyal province. The Abbasids needed the stability, the manpower, and the revenue from Khorasan more than the Tahirids needed Baghdad's interference.
They provided a stable anchor in a turbulent empire.
That's a perfect way to put it.
Okay, so let's pivot now to the long-term thinking here. Their loyalty was a long-term strategy, not genuine submission. It bought them the legitimacy they needed to create institutional depth.
It's the difference between seizing power and building structure. They prove that if you focus on institutionalizing power, owning the revenue, controlling the army, shaping the local courts, by the time the central authority fully gets what you're doing,
you're already too strong to remove.
you're too deeply rooted to be pulled out. They had successfully formalized their functional autonomy.
There's a wonderful anecdote that illustrates this: Tahir ibn Hussein's calculated audacity. It was this subtle act of rebellion performed while he was still officially serving the caliph.
The Friday prayer sermon, the khutbah.
Exactly, the khutbah. It traditionally includes a prayer for the caliph, naming him specifically.
Yes, and back in the 820s, Tahir, while he was still governor, just omitted the caliph's name from the sermon in Nishapur.
Which was a massive, if quiet, political statement.
It was technically treason, but it was so isolated and his service was so essential that al-Mamun reportedly just chose to ignore it. It signaled to the local elite that they were serving Tahir first and the caliph second, all without triggering a war.
That is such a critical distinction, subverting the symbolic power while maintaining the administrative functionality.
And this had monumental consequences for Persian identity.
Right.
For 200 years, Persians were largely administrators for Arab rulers.
Right.
The Tahirids were the first dynasty after the initial conquest to build a hereditary rule in Muslim Persia. They governed as Persians while simultaneously serving the caliphate.
They showed that Persian culture, language, and administrative expertise could flourish and lead within a larger Islamic political framework.
Absolutely. They actively sponsored Persian scholarship and fostered a cultural identity that was distinctly local but fully Muslim.
And that legacy is why their fingerprints are everywhere. They trained the political class that followed them.
Their specific administrative culture, their tax systems, their model of balancing local identity with centralized religious deference. It was directly copied by the Samanids, who later became the great patrons of the Persian Renaissance, and the Buyids, who eventually seized control of Baghdad itself.
So the Tahirids were the quiet, essential first step.
They were.
Their quiet rule ended in 873, absorbed by the rise of the more aggressive Saffarids. But the collapse didn't erase their fundamental contribution. That template for semi-autonomous rule and the successful integration of Persian identity, that stayed.
You know, when you look at Islamic history, the Tahirids often just blend into the background. They weren't flashy, but they fundamentally reshaped how the Eastern Caliphate was governed. They proved that Muslim governance could adapt and absorb local national strength without necessitating a violent breakup of the larger Islamic unity.
So what can we take away from the story of quiet, deliberate power building in 9th century Khorasan? I mean, the Tahirids teach us that influence often works most effectively when it's steady, patient, and focused on operational control rather than loud titles.
If we synthesize their methods, we find a really powerful strategic framework.
Okay, so first, focus on institutionalizing your power, not just demanding recognition. Tahir didn't ask for a fancy title in Baghdad. He took control of the mechanisms of the state, the taxes, the army, the courts in Nishapur.
Second, understand that stability is a commodity. The Tahirids made themselves indispensable by solving the caliphate's problems locally. They proved that strong local leadership could be more valuable than weak central control.
Third, strategic loyalty is a tool, not a weakness. By maintaining that facade of service, they gave themselves the space and time to grow their state organically without triggering the full might of the empire against them.
They proved you don't need to break the system to change it. You just need to become the system, piece by piece, until you are too important to fail.
So ask yourself, what quiet work are you building that will outlast the noise and conflict around you?